Hello, this is Professor Tom Wolf. This is the third in our series of short videos that show the Java dialogues. So we're going to talk about the show input dialog this time. So as we've seen before, we have these different GUI components that we can use in console programs. We can also use them in full-blown GUI programs. But what's nice when we have a console program is it adds a little bit of functionality to it. So last time we looked at JOptionPane.showInputDialog, which that just shows a message. Now we're going to look at showInputDialog, which actually prompts the user for some input. So again, this is going to be a modal dialog, and you can see that it says JOptionPane.showInputDialog null, enter file name to write. And then on the left-hand side, we have an assignment, out file name. So this statement is going to execute. It'll show the dialog. The user is going to clear the dialog or enter something, and it'll get returned in out file name. So here, if we want to check to see if the user actually did anything, we just check to see what got stored in out file name. Okay? One more time, the null reference here is because we're using this GUI component when we don't have a graphical user interface. Normally that would refer to a JFrame or JPanel object, but since we're running the console, we don't have those, so the reference is just null. Okay, let's look at the code here, and then in a second we'll go to NetBeans. So we have to import the JOptionPane library. It's part of the swing. And then here, this command, out file name, will go ahead and display the dialog, and it'll collect this. Now, out file name has to be a string, so that's something we'll see in a minute, is that this input dialog only reads strings. Now we're going to trim out file name, which removes any leading or trailing spaces. And then if it turns out that it's equal to the empty string, that means the user just hit return and didn't enter anything. And what I did here in this code is I had a default file name to use. You can do whatever you want. You could error out, tell the user that they made a mistake, and loop and make them do it again. So here we're using the out file name, which is either given by the user here or is the default if they didn't do anything to open a new file. Okay? All right, let's go and look at this in NetBeans. And I think I have, got the wrong file open, so let me just double click here. So this is the same file example that we've been using, and if we come down here we can see that we're using the where the hell is that? Sorry about that. Right here, we're prompting the user for the file. Okay? So let's go ahead and run this. This is the JFile chooser. I want to choose the heroes.txt file. And now this is the input, the show input dialog from the JOptionPane that we just talked about. Okay? So if I hit OK, it used my default text file. Let's look in the code for that, which is up here at the top, default.txt. So if we come over and look inside our text file sample project, let's switch to the file view. Oops, that kind of sucks. There we go. Default text. So it used default text because I hit OK without entering anything. Let's run it again and get our JFile chooser. And this time I'm going to go ahead and again read the heroes, but this time I'll type one in. So new counted file, hit OK. There's the output, and then if we come over here, here's the new counted file, and it has the same thing in it. Okay? So again, just real quickly, let's look at the code. So we assign the JOptionPane.showInputDialog output to a variable of type string, and then we just test to see if we have something, and then we go ahead and use either what the user gave us, or if they didn't give us anything, we reassign that to a default. Okay? All right, let's continue with our presentation. So one thing you just saw is that JOptionPane.Dialog gets numbers. Excuse me, I said the wrong thing, exactly the wrong thing. It always reads strings. When we want a number, we're going to have to convert the string that we read from the user into a numeric value. And Java has a couple of static methods for this. One is integer.parseInt, and the other is double.parseDouble. I think there might also be a float.parseFloat. Okay. Usually, though, we use integers, and then if we have currency or anything that's got a fractional part, we usually use doubles rather than floats. Okay. Now, one problem with these methods is they throw a checked exception called number format exception. And we talked about this, that when you code and you have a method that throws a checked exception, you have to code against that. So we have to use a try-catch block, or we have to throw the exception to code that handles it. So what I'm going to show you now is how to use this in the context of the try-catch block. So if we look here, we're going to go ahead and get a number. We say enter the first value, and we'll store that in response. So again, that's going to be a string. So for instance, if the user typed 15, it wouldn't be 15. It would be the string 1, 5. Okay, and you can't do math on a string. So then we have to parse it. So if you look here, val1 equals integer.parseInt response. That's going to take the string 1, 5 and convert it to an integer value 15. Now notice this is in the try block, and here's the catch, number format exception, and then system out print line, you entered response instead of a number exiting. And notice that when we halt the program, we pass the 1 in, so we're not halting, we're halting because we had an error. Okay, that's kind of a subtlety, we don't have to worry about that. Let's go ahead now and look at this in NetBeans. I've got another example, and let me go over here to projects, and we'll go to this code here. So this is just a simple program that asks the user for two numbers and then shows their sum. So we have variables for the first value, the second value, and the sum. Those are integers. And then we have a string value for the response that we need to use with the JOptionPane.Dialog. Okay? So, by the way, this is not written very well at all. It's designed simply to show you how this works. And I'm expecting I'll have another video where we'll use this input method in a separate file, like our safe input file that we developed. So it'll loop until we get a number. Okay, so let's see. So response equals JOptionPane.showInputDialog. It's null because we don't have a GUI. Enter the first value as the message. Then we go ahead and try to convert that response we got to an integer value called val1. If that doesn't work, we'll have the number format exception. We go ahead and print out what the user entered because it's not a number, and then we exit with an error code of 1. If that works okay, then we go ahead and get the second number, and the code for that is identical, except now I'm converting the response to val2. So I'll have val1 and val2. If both of those worked, I'm still running the program. I calculate the sum as the sum of val1 and val2, and then I just print it out. Okay? So if we run this program, enter the first val ER, which is wrong. I hit OK, and it goes ahead and exits. If I run it again, this time I'll put in 15, and I'll put in 20, and it'll say the sum of 15 and 20 is 35. So it works fine. So again, you have to just worry about using the try-catch block when you use the number format exception anytime you're using a value that can throw that, a method that can throw that. And here the value that method that can throw that is the parseInt. Parse double is the same way. It'll throw a number format exception. It's a checked exception, so you have to use the try-catch block. In your book, he discusses this in the context of reading numeric data from files. Okay? And basically in my videos that I have for creating the gradebook app, I show this. But I wanted to isolate this for you so you can see it by itself. Okay, let's return to our presentation. And I just wanted to mention a couple of things here because most of you that are taking this, if you're in software development, you're going to go on to learn JavaScript. It turns out that JavaScript has a series of methods that are very similar. So this one that we just did that does input in JavaScript is window.prompt. We pass a message, which is the prompt. It tells the user what we're looking for. And then again, we have a variable that catches the return. I didn't show this here, but there's an optional parameter here, which is a default value. So for instance, with that file name, I could have default text. And then if the user didn't enter anything and they just cleared the message, it would have default text as the value of file name. Otherwise, it would have whatever they typed. Okay? And I didn't show this before, but when we looked at showMessageDialog in Java, the JavaScript equivalent for that is window.alert. Okay? So I just thought I'd show you those. It's nice to tie this stuff in. Yep, that's all we have here. So let me go ahead and find my control for my video. I don't do well with this. There's got to be a better way of doing this. It's probably me learning what the shortcut is for this.